right, back in studio, back in the library, Jim Beebe and Lucas Lorian with Athlete Builder. Different guest on today, it's Craig Haggard. Our first episode was Lucas and me talking about what we're doing with the show. Second one was our first ever guest. That was Coy Anderson, and he's a ranger in the Army. Circling back to the military profession background, we have Craig today. Started off in the Marines, ended up in the Air Force. So a little bit about Craig. Born and raised Hoosier, Mooresville, Indiana. Graduated Mooresville High School 87, Hanover College 91. Went to OCS with the Marines right there in 91, but before they can go to flight school, which is what he planned to do, he had to go through basic. All the Marines are riflemen first. Finished that and was touring with the Marines up through 2000, where he converted over to the Air National Guard in the Air Force. And then flew for, was it 11 more years there? Is that right, Craig?
About 7 more years, but served 11 more years after that.
So been serving and in a role serving his fellow man in the country for a long time. I met Craig at my gym a few years back, so we've been colleagues, friends, coaching, athlete for a number of years now, and just been staying in touch and contact. I met a couple times, talked about some different things, some health initiatives. So I was wanted to reach out and ask Craig to be on the show, see what he learned from a leadership standpoint, mindset, training, discipline, determination, all those good things. So for all those reasons and more, we have him on today. He's a current state representative here in Indiana. Mm-hmm. And my understanding is that he plans to announce that once the incumbent steps down, he's going to run for Congress in the upcoming election. So we have Craig Haggard on here today. So welcome to the show, Craig. Happy to have you. Thanks so much.
Thanks, Hap. Thanks for having me on. I appreciate it.
For sure. So just back in high school, I like to go through things chronologically if we can. Did you play any sports? Did you play any sports in school?
I was a typical Midwestern kid, did the Little League stuff, then came up through high school and actually wrestled quite a bit, enjoyed that, and played football. So in high school and junior high, I wrestled and played football.
Gotcha. And then, so right from high school, you went to Hanover. Were you already set with an ROTC plan at Hanover?
So now Hanover's, since it's a private school, they don't have ROTC.
Gotcha.
So I had to search and find out and talk to people, make phone calls, look in phone books, and go to the library back then, internet days, and I went through what's called the PLC program, the Platoon Leaders Class, and that's one of the different avenues to become an officer in the Marine Corps.
So you finished with, was it a bachelor's degree in what at Hanover?
Bachelor of Arts degree, and I was actually a communication and theater major. Prior to going to the Marine Corps. I don't even know if you knew that.
I did not. I didn't see that anywhere. It's interesting because to be, one of the officers, leadership's a big thing. Communicating, obviously, a big thing. So I imagine that must have served you well. I mean, when you listen to Jocko, his degree was in English, so the communication must have served. I don't know about theater. Maybe be able to fake it to your superiors. Maybe, right?
That'll be good in politics, I guess. Right?
I imagine so. You said it, buddy. So you finished in the Air Force, and you're a local businessman, small business owner, real estate. Wife, 4 kids. You ended your military career as a lieutenant colonel. Did I have all that right there, Craig?
Yes, sir. You got it all right.
So far, so good. All right.
I'm glad we focused on that theater thing.
Not the lieutenant colonel, not the flying airplanes, at least not yet, but we'll get to it.
All right.
So walk me through, you leave college, and then it's basic training in the Marines. They usually either go to Quantico on the East Coast or San Diego on the West Coast. So I imagine you're an East Coast guy, right?
Well, so it's not really basic training. That was OCS. So OCS for officers, the equivalent of the basic. And then I went to what's called the basic school, which is not basic, as everybody knows it. That's basically a 6-month-long infantry school where you learn to fire every weapon, you learn leadership, small tactics, and every MOS, military occupational specialty in the Marine Corps, and concentrate on all Marine officers being field line officers.
Gotcha. And then once you finished that, and then it was off to flight school.
Yes. Aviation indoctrination down in Pensacola. I think they call it something else now, but for us old guys, it was called AI.
Aviation and indoctrination. How long does that last?
That usually lasts, if I remember back, 2 or 3 months. And that's basically engineering, aerodynamics, your water survival stuff, the Officer and the Gentleman movie where you see in the dunk tanks and all that, and then medical, make sure that that's where Naval Air Medical Institute at the time, it's called NAMI. That's where they make sure that you're all good to go physically to do it.
Awesome. So most people don't realize that the Marines have their own aviation, group. Obviously, the Air Force does, Navy does as well. They're landing on the boats oftentimes. The Army does as well, but the Marines do too. So why the Marines? Why'd you pick them?
It's one of those things, especially as a young kid, type A personality like you guys, and especially like Lucas here, I'm sure that when you start to look at all the services, I wanted to fly, and I, like you, I had to learn who flew what did they do, and typical of you talk to the recruiters and you have the guys going, oh, this is a good deal, we'll put you here, this is nice, these are nice bases. The Marine Corps is basically like, if you want to be a Marine, you do all this horrible stuff. They will literally tell you the bad stuff and say, we're not going to treat you nice. If you want easy, go to the Air Force or whatever. And sorry, Air Force brothers and sisters. And it was one of those things as a kid. I wanted to be the best. I wanted the toughest thing. And so I went into what I still believe today, perceived in reality, I think is the same with the Marine Corps. It's one of the toughest. And that's what I wanted to be part of.
Gotcha. Well, thank you. Thank you for your service, truly. One of my first questions about being in the Marines, what was your oh shit moment, or one of your few oh shit moments? You're like, oh man, I'm a Marine now. Like, there's no kidding around now. It's not just like, here's a pretty poster to hang up on the bedroom wall, or it's all the commercials you see. But hey, this is real, and this is legit.
Yeah, I had a few of those moments, and at different stages. One of the first is one of the young kids in OCS. It's that time where, you can watch the movies and you can think you're tough and you wear the T-shirts and you cut your hair and, yeah, I'm going to be a Marine. I always laugh at kids who say that. It's like, well, you're not a Marine yet. It's pretty easy to throw the bumper sticker on. But the first time you get off those buses and they're screaming at you and you're hot and you're not getting any sleep for the first few days. And anyway, just when you go through all that stuff you've seen in movies like Full Metal Jacket, which is I love that movie, at least the first half. And that was one of those moments. It's like, wow, this is harder than just throwing on a T-shirt.
Right.
And it was great.
Do you think the recruiters painted an accurate picture?
I think I know, there's that controversy. Some do, some don't. I think the Marines, at least my experience, they did. Because we actually had some kids who had come back from OCS and actually helped. We'd run with them, work out with them. They would tell us how it was. They gave us we called it the gouge, paperwork with, hey, this is what you can expect. And I think they did a really good job putting us in with kids. I say kids now, but the young gentlemen had gone through OCS prior to us. And so we actually trained with them before going to give us some sense of an idea what we'd be looking at.
Gotcha. How about outside of basic training or OCS? What was another, like, oh shit, man, this is serious. There's legit risk involved here.
Well, my first time I flew in combat, and I was flying off the USS Kearsarge in the Adriatic Sea. It was for Operation Allied Force in Kosovo, Serbia. And, when you train in the aircraft, you go onto ranges and you drop bombs there, and then they have emitters, we call them, that will emit different radio frequencies that'll simulate surface-to-air missile systems. And our detection systems will pick those up, and we'll get the noises. It's like they look like lollipops. We call them lollipops. I remember crossing over the beach basically in the aircraft for the first time and being lit up by a missile system. And I think I openly said, oh shit, this is real. This isn't fake, And so you start looking, you get, as we said, that pucker factor a little bit, where you suck the seat cushion up a little bit. And because I'd had friends shot down, and you start looking for that. And that was one of the real no-kid moments, along with that same mission the first time my bomb's going down, and it's not on a training range. And so all those things, it was kind of I'll remember that very first flight forever.
When you're in that moment and there's, heightened awareness, your heart's pounding, and people say that you don't rise to the occasion, you default to your level of training, right? Mm-hmm. What are some things they teach you on how to focus, handle adversity, handle the stress in moments like that?
Well, see, it started, I think, from the first time they started screaming at you when you first went in, and you kind of train that way all through the thing. When I try to explain to kids when they go in, when you're in there and they're screaming and they always give you more than you can handle. They always scream, make loud noises, get you tired, do all those things, simulate what we call the fog of war, right? All those extra stressors. And by
Yep.
training in a constant state where all those things are going on, you start to learn to prioritize certain things, block things out. It was still listen, but be able to operate in that environment where you have all that crazy stuff going on. And the same thing in the aircraft. We'll do that in the simulators where they're just throwing everything at you where you're going to crash. There's nothing you're going to do to save it, but they want to see how you handle each one and prioritize those emergencies or being shot at or whatever. So that training existed throughout the entire my entire career in the Marine Corps.
Sure. And then, business owner, obviously you can get distracted with any number of things, personally, professionally. The same deal has to happen, right? Maybe you're not getting screamed at. Sometimes you are, but there's so many things that are going on. And, running a small business myself, I could look at my to-do list and easily see 100 things. That skill is invaluable, be able to prioritize and execute versus just being busy, right? Or focusing on the things that don't really move the needle or make as big of an impact. So that skill learned early on has got to have served you in most endeavors for a long, long time.
I think so. I mean, I can see, just like you're talking about, going down that rabbit hole. You have a list of all these things that somebody else could accomplish. That, by the time you get done, 5 hours gone in the day, and you really didn't do those important things. And so I really do look upon a lot of that training to be able to prioritize, to delegate, to say there's some things I'm just not going to get done. There are tasks you aren't, and that can go away. So I think it was huge in all aspects of my life, from family to business to everything else.
I listened to a number of Jocko's podcasts, and I reference him on the show all the time and learned a lot. I'm very grateful for what the content he's put out. There was one episode in particular, I don't remember the name or the number of it, but he talked about the Marines. And what I recall is that there is an evaluation metric, the eminently qualified Marine. Is that right? Are you familiar with that?
I mean, different versions of that. It's funny. I think everybody that comes in, they want a new medal, so they rename stuff. But yes, I'm familiar with it. I think we called it something else. We did a lot of that stuff in what they call small unit leadership evaluation training, stuff like that. So,
sure.
But yes, I'm familiar.
So there's all these different areas in which you get evaluated, whether it's leadership, communication, handling your tasks, and the minimum standard across the board, the standard where everyone gets a trophy, is typically a very high standard. It's not like, hey, everyone gets by and all the schleps still get to still be Marines. Like, I'm reading right from it right here, and on proficiency, the minimum is you have to be competent, possesses the requisite range of skills, knowledge commensurate with a grade and experience. And then the high end is true expert in field, knowledge and skills impact far beyond those of peers, translates broad-based education experience into forward-thinking, innovative actions. So what impresses me is that if you were just doing a regular grading scale like school, it looks like the minimum grade or requirement is like A-.
Basically, yeah.
And only one gets an A+. So there's a bunch of A-, a bunch of A's, one A+, and if you like a B+ is like a failing grade.
Mm-hmm.
So the standard is how do you adjust and evolve to that standard and that that, I don't know if it's pressure, but that high level expectations in all things that you do.
Well, I know one thing the Marine teaches it's a simple topic, but a huge scale is history and pride. And we constantly study who are the elite leaders, who won the medal, those famous battle stories and things like that. And you always wanted to be that Marine, right? You take my field as being my MOS was 7509. I was a fixed wing Harrier pilot. And to be even selected for jets, you either had to be number one in your class or number one or two each week. I was number one. And so then you start from there. And then you go to jet training, and then you're competing against all number one, number two guys to then get your jet selection. And so, to your point, it is a very, very high expectation every time you fly. And so we take it serious because we want to be good at what we do. We're prideful, very prideful as Marines, but we also are very competitive with each other so we can give each other grief at the same time. And there's all those things where I always hated to say, this is a blast, I'm having fun, because I didn't want people to think I'm not taking it seriously, because we are. But we worked hard and we played hard. And when I say that, it's not in a bad way, but you had all these high level performing folks beating each other up all the time to make each other better. As a matter of fact, it's kind of like the thing like working out. Do you want to work out with somebody or play sport with somebody that you're better than? Not really. Not if you want to get better. So you're always wanting that better person so you can learn from. And every one of those fights, and this goes along with this, and I just want to slip this in here. Every flight I flew my entire career, no matter what time of day, combat, non-combat, night ops, 2, 3 in the morning, you came back every flight and you put in your tapes, you wrote up everything on the board, and you debriefed everyone, and even if you thought it was great. Well, that's great, but what did we screw up, and how can we do this better? We did that on every single flight. Every ship landing is graded. When you see people deployed for 6 months, you have grades, and those grades are posted for everyone to see on the ready room door or somewhere inside, anyway, around the ready room. So everybody knows if you're failing, what you're doing. And there's a pride thing. And always, you want to be at the top of that list. You don't want to be at the bottom. And that's why when, I'll be honest with you, when I came from that environment to a civilian world where, the majority of workers in the Marine Corps, if you want to call them that, are Marines, to your point, everybody's like, I want to be number one, and everybody's kicking butt. You don't have to tell them what to do, and you have to tell them not to work or take a break. And then the opposite is true in the civilian world, right? It drove me nuts.
Sure. Yeah.
So,
would you say that there's no way you're the pilot that you are, or the Marine that you are, if it weren't for the people next to you that were in your unit that you actually had to beat out or learn from? Like, you can't do it by yourself, right?
100%. I think we made each other better. We battled each other, but at the same time, I know I can count on any one of those guys. Hey, can we study? Can we go to the simulators? Can we do this? Can we try this again? You listen to each other. You don't get mad when somebody tells you what you did wrong if they're the ones grading you. You just, you learn from it.
When you're mad, how do you then receive the feedback? Nowhere near as well, in my opinion, because you're thinking about being insulted or your ego. So you're already focusing on how you're feeling versus taking in the valuable knowledge, which will make an impact on your next mission, which could be pretty soon. I think the accountability and the feedback are the two biggest things for people's success, along with your teammates, that you have those folks telling you, well, here's what you did wrong, then you can make all the adjustments. If I can make 1,000 adjustments quicker than you make 3 or 4, because I'm taking on all the feedback, then I got a better shot of winning, don't you think?
We always said that people that couldn't admit when they were wrong, or that I just didn't know something, if you can't admit that, I really didn't want to fly with you. I think you're more dangerous. I'd rather have a person who's flawed that will admit they're flawed than somebody who is great, but then when they screw up, they can't admit it, because I think that can lead down that dark path that could really get other folks hurt.
Yeah, that ego thing, and I'm easily guilty of it, is it just clouds your judgment and just ends up holding you back. You talk about your unit and the I want to make sure I say this right, esprit de corps, a feeling of pride, fellowship, loyalty shared by a group or your team. So you already hit on that a little bit, that you guys have a pride thing as an individual with your own identity, but then you have pride as your unit, that you want to win things, score better than other folks. Mm-hmm. And when you can set up that in your own company or in your own life, like that's where you really make big strides. Talk about the esprit de corps component in your unit.
Well, I mean, it's not just so. In the Marine Corps, I've talked about this with brothers from Army and Navy, and Army's huge, and that's kind of our big difference. But they have a lot of pride and esprit de corps in individual units, and they're outstanding. So we give each other grief, but I'm here to say all the services, no matter how much grief we give them, are outstanding. But in the Marine Corps, you have, once again, pride in the units, but you have pride as Marines in general. And we understand, and we preach the whole team concept. Like we're called a MAGTAF, a Marine Air Ground Task Force. And we're, the air, land, and sea from the song, or what, our stuff. We are meant, and we were created to work, and we trained to work as a team. because my whole sole purpose, I'd like to say, in Top Gun, I'm this cool guy or whatever. But the reality is, and we knew it was important, my whole job in the world in the Marine Corps was to support that Marine on the ground. Or if we were, supporting an Army guy or whoever, a soft guy on the ground or whatever, our whole purpose was to support them. We weren't the important folks. We were there to show up, hit stuff, time on target, bombs on target, things like that. And I think everybody knew, no matter what job that was a piece of puzzle to us being successful, and we're proud of that. So, and I think that I hope that we taught that. I mean, there's your occasional person that doesn't understand that I'm doing that, but your logistics person, which I would never want to be, because they, have sheets and sheets, thousands of things they sign for. That's not me. But they're probably one of the most important people out there. It's not the most exciting job, but it's probably one of the most, the biggest.
Still critical.
Yeah. Right? Yeah, 100%.
So in a number of years and in the Marine Corps, you seem to enjoy your time. It seems to be challenging, I would say exciting work, right? But then there's a switch, Air National Guard, right? So what brought about that transition to that different, I'll call it the next season in your life?
So, I mean, I still wanted to fly, and I love doing it. I love the Marine Corps, and there are times I kind of wish I hadn't left, but I think that there's always reasons. God has a reason, at least I believe, for the places we are and our different journeys in life. But I was kind of tired of being gone all the time, and I wanted to have a home base, come back home, but I still wanted to serve my country. And believe it or not, I bought this book that said, I can't remember who did it, but anyway, it said How to Fly in the Guard and Reserve. And it was a whole book. You looked it up the state. It said what aircraft platforms were flown there and who the contact was. And I flew, went to Indiana. Oh, we have F-16s in Fort Wayne and Terre Haute. Terre Haute's closer. And so basically I started the process much similar to a fraternity process of rushing that squadron to try to fly for them. And now there's a formal process, and of course there's that informal process. So I flew down a few times, started talking to folks. But I really wanted to come back home to my home state. I love Indiana. I think there's a lot of great things here, and my family's here. But I still wanted to serve. I wanted to continue that, and so I chose to trade in the Marine Corps blues for the Air Force blues.
So where were you in the building the family process at this point?
So I had one young daughter that when I was in Operation Allied Force, that my wife was pregnant with her, and I actually had her ultrasound picture up on my bunk along with other family pictures. But and that was something I thought about too. Each time you went up, it's like, wow, I'm going to have a daughter. I hope that I make it back to see her. And I made it home 3 days prior to her being born. So at that point in my life, that was our first daughter.
Dang. Okay. And now you have 4 now too, right? 4 total.
Yeah, our blended family of 4 kids.
Gotcha. And so boys, girls, what's that look like?
So we got 2 boys, 2 girls. Our oldest, proud of him, he's a Marine Corps Captain Select, JAG officer in the Marine Corps.
Okay.
Oldest daughter, Isabella, who was the one that our first daughter, my first daughter, is an engineer, lives in Denver. My youngest daughter, who we adopted from Russia, who's my little fighter, my fellow hunter and wild child. She's engaged and still lives around the hometown. And our youngest is Aiden, who is a great kid, high-functioning autistic kid that is now in his second year of physics in college. So, great kids.
Dang. Awesome. That's great. So, fast forward to present day, your state representative. How long have you been in office?
So, I'm coming up on my second session.
Second session, okay.
Fairly new.
Mm-hmm. One of the things I wanted to talk about today, I know we had talked a few months ago about it. You came to me and said, hey, Jim, we hear about different things with health initiatives, getting people in the state of Indiana healthier, whether it be obesity or diabetes, heart disease, things like that. And we just open-ended questions like, what do you think about those issues, or what would be some potential solutions? So if you want to just bring me up to speed or bring us up to speed, like how's that being kicked around in your neck of the woods?
Well, I know that, it's a big concern. We all know, we've seen the list. Indiana is topping the list on the list we don't want to be on. We're unhealthy as a state. We have a lot of obese folks, a lot of heart disease and smoking, and you name it. We're not doing great. And I know our Medicaid and Medicare funding is going through the roof, and it's accelerating with, and there's a whole bunch of variables, not just people getting unhealthy, but that's a huge factor.
Sure.
And it's hard to crack that nut. I know we've talked about it because we always say you can't legislate a person's heart, right? You can't say you're going to be healthy, you're going to do this. So I'm kind of a believer in offering incentives and some requirements. And I also truly believe that it's easier to start with youth. And that's,
Right.
that's where, you got to set that foundation. And we as adults, unlike some other folks think in this country right now that think that 3-year-olds can make life-changing decisions. Won't go into that, but I think that's an important time to build that base, and that's where I believe, and I think we talked about, to get kids at a young age introduced and make it common. This is what you do. This is health. Here's some basic physical fitness skills, because we had this back in the day. If people remember back when the presidential fitness award or whatever it was called.
Yep, I remember that.
Once again, as a kid, we wanted to beat all the other kids out, and we wanted to have that patch and everything else, and we don't see that today. But I'll be honest with you, I've received a lot of pushback on, instituting some of that stuff in schools. You have this, schools want to be independent. They want this, they want that. Well, at the end of the day, as a legislature, we actually have the authority to make some requirements and tell them what to do. On one hand, you hear people say we don't want to tell them what to do, but on the other hand, we actually do force them to do things. I think last year, as an example, with the financial literacy, said, okay, you guys aren't doing this, so we're going to make that a requirement. Anyway, a couple other things with reading, some other stuff, but I don't know. I'm frustrated, to be quite honest with you.
Sure.
And if anybody hears this, and we all know it, this is not a conspiracy. We know the situation of our health in Indiana. We need people to reach out to their legislators, their state reps, their state senators, congressmen, the governors, and start saying, hey, let's put some stuff in place that get our kids healthy, because at the end of the day, we're setting these kids up to fail and to have health problems, which is not only horrible for them, but also kind of horrible for the state in general.
Every society, every culture, every person, every company goes through that life cycle. And all the great countries in the past, or companies, at some point they all go into some level of decline. Could be the Huns, could be the Egyptians, it could be the Romans. England was considered, king or queen of the world, right? And, the U.S. as a superpower, things like that. When you are affluent, wealthier, have more money, you have more luxuries, so then you don't strain as much because you don't have to or want to. There's plenty of countries with no air conditioning, right? Well, we have air conditioning. There's plenty of countries with bad water or food, but we have plenty of that. Or it's hard to get food, but we can get it anywhere, gas stations, grocery stores, etc. But all those hard times in the beginning create stronger folks. And those stronger folks make better times, better companies, better teams, better countries. So then they have those easy times coming, and those easy times lead to weaker folks, worse habits. The fall of Rome actually occurred. And if you say that we're an unhealthier state in an unhealthier country and the trend is still down, well, my guess is going to have to continue until like the proverbial alcohol bottoms out, right? Mm-hmm. Until the country or the people, they bottom out. We're so unhealthy that things have to change. As an example, I know one of our coaches was a PE teacher for 30 plus years. So it's 2013 or 2023, and he's been coaching with us for 4 or 5 years. So right around the 90s, when he was working at the local middle school, which was much, much smaller in Plainfield 30 years ago, there were 7 PE teachers in the middle school. Well, now there's only 2, and the middle school is exponentially larger.
Yeah.
Whereas they're not even, some schools aren't even requiring like PE at middle school, let alone, high school. So just some basics alone like that, I would think could make an impact in having some people healthier by simply being more active. What about like a thought like that?
Oh, I think that's huge. I think we need to put more emphasis on that. I think right now in schools, I personally think we have the emphasis on a lot of the wrong things. And, you've looked at this trend through the years of getting rid of PE, in some places arts and shop and, all those basics, the foundation. I always said schools should be the foundation. They don't teach multiplication tables anymore. They think we just made them start doing cursive again, but they didn't. All these foundations are going away to all these crazy tests. Somebody with a PhD, oh, this is this way. And we've seen that more and more, study to testing, get rid of the foundations. And we've seen us as a country, our students going down the scale than going up. We spend more money on our students in this country than any other country in the world. And I think it goes to show money doesn't solve the problems. This testing doesn't solve the problems. And but I think going back to all those foundations, whether it be physical fitness or the other things, that's going to make us better.
What about someone says, man, Craig and Jim, I'll be 49 here soon, and you're older than I am. Hey, you guys are just a bunch of old guys, get off my lawn kind of folks, right? You guys are a bunch of old shits. What the hell do you guys know? It's not how it is anymore. It's not how we do things. You guys are too old. You don't understand. What do you say to someone like that says that to you?
Well, I usually don't. I always said this to my kids. I don't argue with my kids. I might have a discussion with them, but also I'm that believer that I'm an adult for a reason, and there's reasons why we still make the decisions.
Right.
And I would hope to. I mean, here's the thing. I'm not one of those leaders. We call these, or at least I called those guys, leading from the shoulder. You'll see where I'm going with that. That, I'm a colonel, I'm this, I'm that. And then they just scream at you, do it because I say. And that works to an extent, but it doesn't motivate people on the side. And once again, it doesn't change their hearts. So I'm not one to do that. But I probably would be one as if a kid was saying that, to challenge him. Okay, I'm the old guy. You're right. But how about we do something together? Let me prove me wrong. And I used to do this to my guys when I was commander. They had an idea that I either did like or didn't like. And if I didn't like it, I didn't shoot it down. If nobody was going to die, I think failure helps us learn. And so there are times like with a kid like that, I would say, okay, listen, I'll try this or try my way, and we'd make a bet. If I lose, I'll go out and buy you a steak dinner and a beer for the older guys, not the kids.
Right.
And vice versa, and kind of challenge them that way, and then almost turn it into a contest. Try to pull out that competitive side of them, because
right.
I think because then you turn it into a not because I told you so. Well, you know what? Prove me wrong, or try
right.
this, and if I'm wrong or whatever. And that's kind of how I've always led. I don't know if that's the right answer. Obviously, it depends on the personality of the kid, and if he's a kid willing to do that or belligerent. I don't know. But at the end of the day, I think it goes back to we're still the adults. It's why we put things in and get them, because we all know we were all probably that way at that age. Puberty kicks in. We know everything. My sons and daughters, they all had that streak, and it's tough to start teaching then. But that's why I just keep going back to that foundation. But for an older kid, that's how I was successful with some kids. I've mentored some kids and turning it into some sort of a competition kind of thing in a good way, with no negative outcome if you didn't succeed.
Sure, right. It's just a healthy way to push people a little bit better to evolve and advance. And to your point about getting it done at a young age, we were just talking on a couple prior episodes on one of my favorite books, James Clear's Atomic Habits. You really want to make some big changes. Well, it sure is a lot easier when you're younger. Like, you don't know any better, right? So this is now the new habit. Like, we always brush our teeth before we go to bed. Okay. Well, you've been doing it for decades, right? You start brushing teeth before you go to bed at age 50, there's a good chance you're going to forget because you've already spent half a century not doing it. So getting folks to believe that being healthier, being active, being strong physically, being able to move your own body weight or some weight, be able to do some endurance things, run, swim, things like that. And when they see the physical and the mental benefits from it, you can start building a case. Hey, man, see, when you were in shape, like you can probably imagine, Craig, coming out of boot camp, you were probably operating at a pretty high level physically and emotionally and mentally, right? And it'd be probably pretty easy to surmise that leaving the military and all that structure goes away. Maybe some of the discipline goes away. You gotta believe that some folks, whether they leave an NFL team or a career in the military, that without those habits, it's easy to backslide. And next thing you know, you're overweight again, right? I'm sure you've seen that before with other folks. So starting at a young age and keeping it going, it's just way, way easier.
Oh, I've seen that with myself. You've seen me that way. I mean,
That's true. That's true, right?
I
Yep.
mean, you look at, there was a story, I think Bob Costas did a documentary one time about linemen, NFL linemen, and the high rate of obesity and heart attacks and how when they left, the majority of them went down that negative path. And I saw that with me. And there was a whole bunch of things some personal stuff. I left the military, which I didn't, it was my whole life. And even though it was by my own choice, it was tough. I went through a divorce at the time. And then so you start, and I didn't have that everyday discipline. It wasn't a scheduled part of the day. And then I had a really bad accident, which I've told you about. So you compile all that. At the end of the day, I also want to say, like I've said to you many times, that was my choice. Yeah,
Right.
bad things happen, but at the end of the day, it was my choice. It was easy to start making those excuses. It was different. The environment was different. I wasn't around. I'll be honest with you. If I was embarrassed to see at a certain point my old Marine buddies because I didn't want them to see, oh look, what I look like now. It's like I don't want a picture taken of me because I didn't have that. I didn't want to let them down. I felt bad, embarrassed, but I also it's like what kind of I hated calling myself a Marine. I did my I'm a tattooed guy. I had my Iron Man tattoo from doing a full Iron Man and this, that. But I was like, wow, joked to my wife one time, I don't even want to take my shirt off on the beach. They're going to see this fat guy that says, hey, what did he do?
Yeah.
He took a taxi cab at the Iron Man or whatever. And so I went down that path. So I'm a person guilty of that. And then at the end of the day, and I'll be honest with you, and I've told you this, you were the catalyst, even though I moved on because my schedule. But I loved the way you were just direct and honest, and it was that same military style of not taking excuses for me, because we all had excuses. I had excuses. And until once again, I decided to change inside and acknowledge all the things that I had done and said, okay, I may not have everybody around. Find those reasons, right? You always have to find your reason. Part of it is I have grandkids now. I want to be older. I have a whole new career. I want to have that energy. And whatever that reason is, it finally clicked in me with myself, with my wife who works out crazy, with you being direct and other people around. The support system at Unbreakable is just awesome. I mean, I actually, even though I'm not there, I still keep in contact with some of the guys I worked out with, and they put encouraging things out there. So, and I don't remember, to be honest with you, here's where I'm being the old man, what the original question was, but all those things, I've experienced that. So I'm not a guy coming out here that's just been in shape my whole life. I'm a guy that started off as a kid that wasn't in that great of shape. I was a country kid, so I was in pretty good shape, but not Marine shape. And I was there forever, operating at a high level. And then I slid down because of myself, and then I have, thank goodness, now picked it back up, and I'm heading the right direction. And so I've experienced all that, and it's not easy. I think it's easier for a person who's been in shape, and you've probably seen that coming into your gym. You'll know those people, if they've worked out their whole lives, they know what pain is, because we both know that, and I know that you guys both operate at a very high level. A lot of working out and being successful is being able to tolerate being uncomfortable, right?
For sure. For sure.
Yeah, I mean, because you could learn in this and to lift this or lift that, or you could probably eat certain things and look like you're all ripped, but not really have a great functional body. I'm more of a
Right.
body weight Marine kind. I want to be able to toss bags on my shoulder, things like that. You have those guys, and I have friends that are huge and big, but they're not real practical.
Right.
Athletes,
I would say, with anything, it's always a progression. And if you're an active country kid and you played some sports in high school, then you go to the Marine Corps, and then you're military. So those PT tests, systematically, you're improving. And then when you get out, it wasn't like the next day you're 50 pounds overweight. There's, a little thing just kind of just slips away, and you're like, oh, that's okay. I'm still doing all this other stuff. Another thing kind of slips away. That's okay. I'm still doing all this other stuff. And you deteriorate, and it slowly falls apart a little bit. And then at some point, you had a moment where you're like, all right, I've had enough. And you had one thing that you're like, all right, well, I'm embarrassed to take my shirt off. I have these grandkids. I want to do these things. I don't want people to know that I ran an Ironman. So then you start building up. I got this piece pushing me in this one direction. This next piece is pushing me in that direction. Then you have a couple of friends that you talk to. So now you have another component. You're building some momentum. You come and talk to a coach, and they just give you the straight dope. This is how it's going to be. So now you have some direction and some momentum, and then you add in some teammates that are training with you. All right, well, now you got a more sustainable product yourself, and then you can keep steering that ship, or in your case, a plane, in that direction. And it all kind of comes together. And that's, people don't realize that it's the compound interest effect on the up and the down that's really what makes all the change. You can be healthier in the next couple hours. You can go have a healthy meal, drink a bunch of water, go to bed on time, and all right, the last few hours of the day I was really, really healthy. I made some improvements, and then tomorrow you start again. And it's just those small little incremental evolutions that really move the needle more than anything else. And you've seen up and downs, and shoot, I've seen plenty of ups and downs personally. So if you can just keep digging and keep fighting, then you really got a shot. I always talk to the people we have on here about components for athletes' heads, and particularly their mindset, their knowledge of how they perform, and then how they communicate with their teammates, and then their bodies, how they train, their nutrition, and how they recover. And I asked them, like, what are one or two things in all those areas that are critical? And he said, for mindset, you pointed out that goals, short and long term, are both important for an athlete's mindset. We want to talk about that a little bit?
Yeah, I mean, one of the things that got me through, especially Marine Corps, and it may seem simple, but we always had what we call commander's intent or goals or whatever, and I set those and everything. This is where I want to get to, but we all know that you're not having a straight line that gets there right away. And so, as far as I'm a guy that would say, I'd like to have my mile under this. I'd like to do this many push-ups. I'd like to do that. And I set those intermediate goals. But then my immediate goals, like when you're out running, it's the simple thing. Man, I just want to give up. I'm going to make it to that telephone pole. Okay, I made it that. I'm going to make it to the next telephone pole, and I'm not going to make it to that. Hey, there's that. And so I think I think goals are important, but I think they have once again they have to be achievable. They can be hard. But, I'm not going to say, hey, I'm going to get up there and get ripped like whatever, some rip guy. But I just think those achievable, attainable, but tough goals in, the long range and those immediate. Because if not, I think you get frustrated. And what's cool is, to me at least, on those little goals, I'm like, I want to take 10 seconds off my 5K or something like that. Once I set that, man, I'm really pushing for that. And if I do it, I'd be honest with you. I don't know if it's just me, but I'm like celebrating internally. It makes me, it makes me happy. It actually lifts my mood and lifts all those chemicals for that happy mood. And it doesn't have to be. It's something if I told somebody else or somebody, like Lucas, who probably kicked my butt 10 ways to Sunday, that, hey, I did this. You're like, oh, that's impressive, Craig,
Right.
But, but that's okay. But to me, and I'm kidding because I know that folks in the gym and people who actually work out usually, you've heard that. You lift against yourself or you work out against yourself, not against somebody else. And you do sometimes for fun. But I just think all those goals are important because you got to know where you're going, because until you don't really know what to do, right?
Yep. What about this? Because you listed mostly quantifiable, tangible targets. And I like that because James Clear would say you improve what you measure. So your mile time. Tim Ferriss, also would say, and I've read this in his book, and I always come back to it because it was such a shocking statement for me. He said, goals are for losers. Process is for winners. And he went on to explain about that, because I'm like, goals, I have goals all the time. Like, I want a faster mile time or this and that. He says, yeah, but until you hit that, you're not really happy. And then once you hit it, you're happy for a moment, and then it goes away. So to your point, you got to have those small little attainable targets. But we also then further went on saying, I push this to a lot of people is, yeah, you want to have a faster mile time. Let's make the goal that we're going to run 3 days a week.
Yeah.
So each time you run, little win, little win, little win. And on this third run, you're going to run a little faster, push a little harder, so you start ratcheting that time down. So I think it's a combination, ultimately, that you have these process goals that kind of push you in this direction. And then here's your measurable targets. Ultimately, it comes back to when you're done, you said those happy juices, that serotonin, all that chemical releases in your brain. It's the feeling you have because you're improving. And this new version of yourself, the next iteration, I won't say the 2.0, but I would say the 2023 version, it becomes, hey, in 2023, I want to be this. In 2024, I want to be this. If you can tie those process goals and those targets to your own identity, I want to be this person. I want to be someone that executes, it's disciplined, and relentless. Those are all three words I work on, right? So I can execute, get things done. I'm disciplined and I'm relentless. If I want to be that person, well, what does that look like quantifiably? To your point about the faster mile time. But if you can tie those process goals and those targets to your own identity and who you are, now you kind of own it. Because you would say to yourself, hey, man, I'm a Marine, right? I'm a pilot. I flew Kosovo. I flew these missions. I'm this guy. Like, this is me. This is who I am. You will look, some people would say, like, the pen or the barbell or the plane in your instance is an extension of yourself, right? I am this. If you could tie those things to your own identity, then truly, truly powerful. And it's a lot harder to quit and get off target. So if you can dial that in with people that you're trying to impact, I think it goes a long way.
Yep, I agree. But to get those processes, you have to have that big goal.
You do. You're right. Yeah.
You need to get there, right?
Sure. Yeah. The goals are directional. So, this is where I want to be.
I
right.
agree with you because, and that's all goes. So I guess no, 100% agree with the process because that is, you have those people that have those lofty goals, but they don't say, I'm going to do this so many times a week and all that kind of stuff, and you're just never going to get there. So a lot of good intentions.
Right. The next piece, the knowledge piece, you already mentioned this before, with all those immediate debriefs after a mission. And when I'm dealing with athletes in high school and college, I call it, for lack of a better term, those AAR reports, those after action reports. Because then you're always dissecting where you could be better. How do you continue to do that in what you're trying to accomplish, your small business or political life, things like that?
Well, in the political life, and I'm having a meeting tomorrow with that, we have things that we do and we see the outcome of those. And those are measured by, a lot of different analytics now, and on stuff online and turnout and polling and all that kind of stuff. And we do the same thing. We do goals. We have different processes. We say, from media stuff, every day for an hour, I have to work on my media. Every day, that's a process thing. I'm going to make at least this many phone calls. I'm going to set up this many meetings. I'm going to do all that stuff. And this is in the campaigning part of it, not the legislation part of it. But I always, and then in general, I always had a general thing that said, kind of my motto was, I was always going to run like I was behind. I'm always losing in my mind.
Right.
And because we've seen that where people get comfortable, they've been in a while. And by doing that, I think it also is measurable. And when you hear people, and I always love this when I hear people say, you're still everywhere. And I had somebody ask me when I went to an event one time, are you running? This was last year. Are you running again right now? I said, no, I'm not running. Well, why are you here? Because it's my job. And this is part of my process. I still need to go to this, talk to these people. Anyway, all those things is kind of what I do on the campaign mode. In the legislation side, you have goals. My goals, I have certain bills that I want passed, and I want at least to get this done or be part of certain priorities. And those are obviously easily measurable by a success of getting those things read and through committee and all those things you do to make a bill become a law. We remember the old Schoolhouse Rock stuff.
I remember that little white bill wrapped up in that song that's coming along. That and Conjunction Junction. I remember those both from Schoolhouse.
Yeah.
Dealing with teammates, and you wrote to listen. Sometimes you learn some things, and sometimes you just listen. And you might not learn anything, but you want to let others know that you are actually listening. So maybe you don't really benefit from it, but there's still the act that, hey, I'm going to listen to you because it's the right thing to do, and you still could. So talk about that a little bit with dealing with folks that on both sides of the aisle, or people that might disagree, or maybe even people that are pissed, right? Or this didn't get passed, or something like that. So talk about that a little bit.
Well, I mean, I think it's always important to listen because the more, and I'm sure most people, at least I've been this way when I did humanitarian work and other stuff, the more I did humanitarian, the more I've learned, the more I've done, the more I realize I don't know, or the more I realize I haven't, and that there's always something to learn. That's why I like this new chapter in my life, because I'm learning. I thought I was an expert on all this stuff. And I come to find out I just knew the surface level of politics and how things get done. Along with working out, there's so many new things. And so I think it's always important, at least that's the reason to always listen, shut up, because I know what I know, but if I was going to you in particular for help, why am I going to tell you what I need? I don't know what I need. And so I think there's a lot of those times and you get those golden nuggets, right, that come out of somebody's mouth. You're like, crap, that is new. I didn't know that. I didn't think about it that way. So that's why it's obviously important to learn, because I think that we don't know everything. There's no way we can know everything. And so you're always going to learn something in some situation, big or small. Now, when I was talking about, sometimes you just want to shut up. Well, that's important too, because a lot of times I think if a person knows you're never really going to listen, whether it's something you need to hear or not hear, then sometimes you're going to miss out, because then those folks won't want to come to you because, oh, he never listens to me.
Right.
And that's why I think it's important, because maybe you learn something, but also it breaks down that wall of people not wanting to come to you and talk. And sometimes people, to help them out, sometimes you don't need to say anything. There's no golden nuggets that are going to come out of me that probably help this person, other than sometimes people need to release and just invent. And a lot of times, and I'm sure you've experienced this, where you start talking to a person, but you start figuring out your problem by talking to someone else, even if they're not responding back.
Right.
And I've found that
just
seems to work.
Saying it out loud. Yeah, just saying it out loud might present the solution. My wife points out this one thing: when the kids are younger, or even with athletes at the gym, they might be rattling on about something that's not really that impactful or important. It could be useless. We always call it chicken fingers, like we're talking about. Oh, they call to tell you that this is what they had for lunch. I'm like, how could that absolutely matter? And what Jen would say, yeah, it really doesn't. But if I listen to them every little time on these things, I don't just blow them off. Then when there's something important weighing on them, I probably built up enough. I made enough deposits of equity in the relationship so that they, you know what, I can go to Jen, or I can go to Jim. And so if you listen enough, at least with your athletes at the gym, at some point they might say, hey, you know what, I know we're doing this, but I really want to be, a lot leaner, or I really want to just be faster than everybody, or I'd like to be stronger than everybody else. So, or maybe they'll say, hey, I had a bad heart scan, and if I don't get some better numbers and lose some visceral fat, I'm in real trouble. So if you listen to the little things, a lot of times the important things will come out down the road when they present themselves. That's huge. That's good. On your nutrition piece, this is a great line you put here: eat things that make you feel good the next day. Not in the moment. Not in the moment, whether it's eating or drinking. So I don't know that even needs much explanation. I know that if I love pasta and Italian food and bread, but I also know how bloated and kind of how shitty I'm going to feel the next morning. Right.
Well, if you're having a great time, I'll say this for my wife, who's a guilty partner, and she's much younger and in great shape, so I'm not giving her grief. But it's one of those things where you can tell she's having a great time, because all of a sudden I hear, let's go to Taco Bell.
Oh man, let's double down on the night and do a Taco Bell run.
Or go get the Crave case, from White Castle, which I'll admit, I love them, right? But then the next day you feel horrible, you sleep horrible. And it's amazing. I remember one of the times when I was starting to get back in shape, and I was at a conference in Chattanooga for whatever reason, and all the times they always had these things catered. I was with the NRA at the time, always catered. There was donuts and scones or whatever, all this crap. For some reason, for a good thing, and it was actually part of the beginning of my new journey in Chattanooga, all they had laid out was slices of raw cucumber and peppers and all this kind of stuff. And I was hungry, so I'm just munching away, because I love vegetables anyway, munching, and water, and all this kind of stuff. And literally the next day I was like, oh my God, I feel great.
Right.
I know I think that's stupid and simple, but and so it's one of those things where, if you have that extra water and you eat that stuff, my wife and I now share meals, and that's a lot of the things. How's this going to make me feel the next day? It's kind of what I say to myself internally versus right now, because I'm like you, we just came back from Italy, but I have to say the pasta over there, actually, I didn't feel as bad after eating as the pasta over here. So you start also learning what foods is a great example over there, even though we perceive them as bad over here. If they're natural and they're not bleached, you don't have all this crap added to them, that actually you don't feel too bad. So it also makes you start to say, hey, I should start eating natural stuff.
Yeah, sure does. Yeah. You can make huge gains just eating natural organic food or whole food. In fact, there's an entire diet, Whole 30, based solely on just eating whole food. So Any tips on training with consistency, or at some point there's some level of discomfort to make any kind of progress, lowering your mile time, a heavier back squat, or persevering carrying long rucks, backpacks, just carrying a person, right? So any tips there on training?
On keeping training, or just exactly what to do, you mean?
Not necessarily on what to do, but the mindset that goes along to persevering and suffering just a little bit longer, so you can, like you said, hit those small goals, which translate to your larger one.
Yeah, and this may sound crazy. I think it's a big time accountability. I have a couple friends and my wife, because she works out a big time, that I tell them what I'm going to do. I tell them what my goals are. I have my daughter who's in Denver, and she actually has gone from being a runner to she's a big weightlifter now. And she'll actually, each time I hit a goal, I send it to my daughter, and she tells me, "Hey, I did a, 185 thrust today," or whatever. We found kind of accountability partners and celebrate each other's little victories. And that's one thing that I've found I've enjoyed. It's also a way I've connected with my daughter who's out in Denver. My wife and I do a lot of stuff together. And so I'm a person I'm a little odd, and I'll say this in a way that I think a lot of Marines are. I actually enjoy that hurt, the good hurt. I enjoy legs burning. I enjoy doing stuff to the edge of maybe throwing up, and I kind of miss that, because when I started to try to get back in shape, it's easy to go, "Oh, I used to be able to do this," and you start doing it, it's like, holy crap, I can't even run half a mile without dying. I can't even get myself to that. The uncomfortable is not because it's you're breaking down that muscle tissue in a good way. It's just because you're so out of shape. And so, as an odd way, part of mine is which is just me personally, I actually enjoy that uncomfortable stuff. But I would say the biggest thing really is just is helped me being accountable to my family mostly. So,
what happens when you or your daughter have some slips? You go a week and you don't work out, or you go on a binge, or you're off the wagon. Are those accountability? I call them allies, not friends. Are they able to, or are you able to say, "Hey, dude, that ain't good enough. You're better than that"?
I can say that to my wife because we have a great relationship,
and that's
how
true
you
with everybody. If I don't have a great relationship with some of my people, they trust me at the gym. I can't go up and say, "Hey, dude, you're full of shit here, man. You're not trying hard." I got to at least develop some kind of relationship the same way as you guys, right? So how do you?
We're very honest with each other to a point where some people that have heard us thinks that you might be being mean to each other. Like, no, she asked me a question, I'm being honest, and vice versa. So we have that. You have to. I think it's important with whoever you're doing it with, as far as accountability. You have to say, hey, we got to have this agreement that we're going to be able to say not mean, malicious stuff, but just honest stuff, and be okay with it. And not everybody is. They say they are until it comes down to it. Now, I'll be honest with you, and I don't know that my daughter will ever see this. I love her to death, but I do know I have to temper how I say stuff to her, as far as, because a lot of girls, well, it sounds horrible, right? But my daughter, at least certain ways, if I say things very direct and honest, can be taken the wrong way. And so that's a tough one, I'll be honest with you. And so I think knowing who you're talking to, but my wife and I have actually had that conversation. Hey, we're going to start this. We're going to hold each other accountable at dinner. If I'm doing this or I'm making that bad decision, it's okay. I'm not going to get mad at you. Tell me, hey, are you making a good decision? And she's done that. And I'll be honest with you, when we first started this, it irritated me a little bit. She's like, hey, you told me to. No, you're right. You're right. And so there's a level of honesty and trust you have to have with people that do that. But that's how we do it.
I think also, which is helpful, is just give up guessing and say, hey, what's your daughter's name?
Isabella.
Hey, Isabella, if I perceive right or wrong that maybe you're not living up to the standards that you're aiming for, how do you want me to hold you accountable?
Yeah, that's actually a great way to do it.
You just kind of ask them, and now the onus is on them. And you say, hey, I'm gonna ask you some questions, because this is how you said you want me to hold you accountable. So then I ask them open-ended questions and kind of direct them. But that's if I don't have this process where I already know what to do. There's some people I can just go say, hey, man, you're fucking up. Nope. And other folks, I'm like, hey man, let's just talk about this couple things. Let's remind ourselves what our whys are, why we're doing these things, and let's just simply ask if our last several habits over this time period, are they moving us in that direction, or not? So I'll take the time to walk them through that. But I would just quit guessing, just ask. All right, a couple questions here at the end. What do you listen to when you're training?
I have my Spotify. I think I wrote it down, but it's on my thing. It's like the ultimate workout rock mix or something like that. And it's
Old
great,
school
to be
rock?
honest with you. It's a lot of head banging 80s.
Right.
I'm an 80s kid. And so I love AC/DC is one of my biggest go-to
Right.
workout stuff.
Awesome. Bucket list adventure you'd still like to do?
Say again, I'm sorry.
Your bucket list adventure you might still like to do?
What?
Whether you can remember what you wrote down or not.
I remember. So it's one of those things where I want to do it, but I also don't want to die, because actually
Right.
I used to climb, and my wife and I love hiking. We said, what can we do that's really impressive? And it was climb Mount Kilimanjaro down in Tanzania. And it's one that you acclimatize. It's actually, you don't have to have that crazy technical climbing skill. You don't have all these people dying like you have on Everest, but it's still something that I think it's probably about 5 days or so on average, and you're doing this acclimatization stuff that can make you miserable.
Sure.
But on stuff like that, I love being a little miserable, and when you complete it, even though you can't really explain that to other people, I love that. I do love that feeling inside. Hey, just step back, and once you come back down, I just did that kind of thing. And so anyway, that's on the bucket list for my wife and I.
Gotcha. Sports movie, you wrote down Hoosiers and Field of Dreams, and being a farm boy, and both those movies take place, in the farm country. Right? Those are great sports movies. Favorite athlete or sport? Did I read this right? Curling?
That's kind of funny, because actually it's one of those guilty pleasures. I love to watch curling in the Olympics. And I always said to somebody, because I'm like, you look at those folks that are curling, and what it shows you is that no matter who you are, you can compete on a world scale at something.
And, I don't know, man. That's more of a drinking game than a sport, But
I mean, I get it. It's a little bit of a joke, but it just says, hey, you can find something for you, right? And
I like that. I like that sentiment. Favorite book? The Forgotten Soldier by Guy. Is it Sayer?
It's Sayer. It's a J silent. So it's written by a true story by a guy who back in World War II was conscripted into the German army. And it was on our Marine Corps reading list as officers and as other folks. You had all these books you had to read. And it was just a great story, because he was half French and half German. He was conscripted. He was sent to the Eastern Front against Russia, and just horrible stuff. And it's a lot of very humanistic stuff about what you experience with your brothers out there. And it's just it's a great book. It's not even so much about tactics. It's more about those relationships and stuff.
Yep.
So,
gotcha. Favorite superhero?
So I put Deadpool.
He's hysterical.
I love the anti-superhero because it's more of a realistic. Because I think, those movies are okay and stuff, but it almost takes the real bad. I think it's funny. I think it's funny in general, but the bad things, once again, it takes some of that realism of what you might really say in real life.
Sure.
And if you had it, you're a flawed character. You can still be a flawed character and be a hero. That's why I kind of like that.
Yeah. Favorite super villain? Hans Gruber. No, I got that reference. Lucas, you know who that is?
No.
No chance?
No chance.
So have you seen Die Hard?
Yeah.
Nakatomi Plaza, he's the bad guy.
That's the main bad guy.
It's been a long time ago. My dad loved watching Die Hard. I was real little, but
you'll know the character Hans Gruber is Alan Rickman, who's passed away, but he was Snape on Harry Potter.
Yep.
Okay.
Goodness.
He's like, oh yeah, I get it. Because he was a classic kind of supervillain, right?
He was, man. He's fantastic. What was a really cool moment, because I watched my wife and I are nerds, and there's this little series on Netflix that goes through like some documentaries on the movies, and there's a documentary on Die Hard, and I'll never forget this, because when Hans is holding on and he has that gun and he's holding on to that ledge, and he he lets go and he's falling. You see the tremendous surprise on his face.
Yeah.
Right. He's locked in there holding on his hands. And the director told him, hey, we're going to let go on 3. And they let go on 2. So since they didn't let go early, he's expecting 3. They actually let go on 2. That's why the look of complete shock. Yeah. And so the director had that one little component of, messing with him, and really just made that whole scene, in my opinion. But what do I know about movies? Favorite way to train? Sorry, go ahead.
I was going to say, as a little side note in that movie, when the SWAT guys are going through the bushes and the guy hits the sticker bush and he's like, ow! That was not part of the movie. He really did get hurt, and he kept it in because he thought it was funny. So another little side thing about Die Hard.
Oh, love it. Oh, I love that nerd stuff. Favorite way to train, you said, body weight exercises or sandbags, things like that. If you had $10 million, what job would you do? You wrote, start a charitable foundation. Well, you don't need 10 million. Like, our gym has a foundation. You can do that for
but that was a specific question.
Right?
So no, I guess what I meant was, I'm happy with where I am. I wouldn't move. I wouldn't change my house. I probably wouldn't change much of my lifestyle, but I would like to be a good steward of that money in some way.
I like it. Favorite quote, life is tough, but it's tougher if you're stupid.
Yeah. Which is hanging right over here in my bar. That's
right.
They always say there's arguments where that came from, but a famous Marine Sergeant Stryker is credited with that. I think some people try to credit John Wayne, but I don't think that's true. But anyway, I just think it's
that's awesome. Any other parting thoughts or anything else? Because we really enjoyed the time here, Craig. Thank you for your service as well, and good luck with your endeavors. But any other parting thoughts or words of wisdom?
Now, at the end of the day, I guess you just have to find out what's important, and anything that is important, that it's worth having. It's not going to be easily attainable, and stuff's worth more if you have to work hard for it. So
true. Hey man, thanks again so much. Love having you around. I'm sure I'll be seeing you at the gym, and again, keep me abreast of anything that happens where we can make a difference with the overall health of our state and especially the youth. That's one of my overall endeavors and things I'm working on. So if I can help in any way, just ask.
I appreciate it. Appreciate you having me. Appreciate what y'all are doing. Thanks.
Sure.
All right. Take care.